Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, December the 16th, 2024. I'm sorry, but I did feel, or I do feel, that I need to have another look at Harry and Meghan. So I have noticed a sort of uptick in terms of commentary about the two of them, and as usual, people are speculating about the state of their marriage and how things are moving from bad to worse, and their business activities aren't working, and their popularity is plummeting. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity to have an update on the couple and to consider what their immediate future is. And with Harry, it's kind of interesting because there is something unexpected going on. I know that many people are saying that things really look bad for him, but there might be a silver lining, and that is something I want to consider in this video. But before I look at Harry and Meghan, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, December the 16th. And have to ask, if you do enjoy this video, I'd be grateful if you were to like it, and if you're not subscribed, I would be really happy to have you as a subscriber. Anyway, so let's look at what's happening today. So as usual, here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York. And so the moon is in Cancer now, and we've got we've got Saturn in a water sign. We've got Saturn in Pisces. There we've got moon trine Saturn. Moon in Cancer is a day when, I suppose, on an emotional level, things are sort of more active than usual. Perhaps there's a greater level of emotional awareness, and at the same time, some of us could be more security orientated than usual, and so we perhaps want to put our own interests first. Nothing wrong with that. And moon in Cancer, trine Saturn in Pisces. That's, I would have said, is something fairly fortunate. It provides stability and maturity, it's a particularly emotional maturity, and we have a certain concept of how far we can go. We're not going to go completely over the top. And at the same time, the week starts with Mercury going stationary direct. I mean, in fact, from a sort of New York perspective, Mercury went stationary direct yesterday on Sunday. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, then Mercury goes direct this morning. But it is something new to consider as we move into a new week, that things have changed. Look at Mercury. Mercury is now it's at 627 Sagittarius, but it's lost CR, no longer retrograde. So as we move into the new week, it just may feel that things are starting to move, that things that were on ice, that we delayed, that we hadn't worked out, finally things are starting to happen. And notice that Mercury is trine Mars. Now, you could say, well, that is a separating trine between Mercury and Mars. But the point is, although Mercury has gone stationary direct, it is at a standstill. It's going very, very slowly. And so it is kind of frozen almost on that trine to Mars. And so with Mercury trine Mars, I think that there may be a lot to say. If there's something that we haven't said, now might be our chance. The words will flow. And if we're angry about something, it maybe we can express that anger verbally. And how successful we are kind of depends on to what extent we get the balance right. But I suppose if something has to be said, then it must be said, and delay may not be an alternative. Another thing to point out is Mars. Mars is, of course, going retrograde, but if you look at Mars, it's opposition Venus, opposition Pluto. So, in other words, in this case, it's on the Venus-Pluto midpoint. And that Mars on the Venus-Pluto midpoint can be quite intense, and it can be about passion, and it can also be about jealousy, and there's also a pride there. So in close relationships, pride could be an important factor, and someone feeling disrespected, someone not getting enough attention, yeah, there could be jealousy. So in terms of close relationship, perhaps that Mars opposition Venus-Pluto, we need to be a little careful there. And maybe in general, it can talk about jealousy and perhaps people being aware of, who's got the advantage, and people maybe getting angry quite quickly and expressing their anger, because of course Mercury is trine that Mars, but hopefully that anger will be expressed in a verbal way. I mean, if indeed it has to be expressed at all. Another aspect, fairly minor aspect, is Sun decile Pluto. I think I've got that right. Yeah, Sun decile Pluto. Well, what does that mean? Well, Sun and Pluto are 36 degrees apart, and that is a tenth of the circle. And so 10 equals 5 times 2. So 5 represents a sort of quintile relationship. It's all about what we're consciously trying to create. And 2 represents the struggle. And so Sun decile Pluto is perhaps about the struggle to create a powerful impression. And that may be something that we're trying to do. We're trying to battle with it. And we perhaps understand that we don't have all the cards, that it may be difficult, but there is a way. And so if we have a vision about our power and what we'd like to be doing, what we'd like to be controlling, maybe with a little bit of effort, we can turn that vision into reality. Now that is the position of the planets in New York, noon December the 16th. If we switch to Sydney, Australia, we get a slightly different picture, but it's not going to be that different. So Moon is at 12:13 Cancer at noon today, New York, and it's at 3 degrees Cancer if you're in Sydney, Australia. Sydney, Australia being just a representative of Australasia and Eastern Asia. And the moon is earlier in the sign, so perhaps that moon trine Saturn is not going to be quite as strong if you're in Australasia, but I don't see necessarily a big difference between the experiences of you in Australia or New Zealand or the Americas, at least in terms of planetary positions and planetary aspects. Then there is the heliocentric picture. So I think, as always, I think it's just important to look at things from the perspective of the sun. And there it is, the sun at the center of the solar system. And now we can see there is an Earth semisextile Uranus. Now, if you remember when I was talking about the full moon over the weekend, I mentioned that the full moon was semisextile Uranus, geocentrically, because the geocentric position of Uranus and the heliocentric position of Uranus are not that different. So what we're seeing is what we saw in a geocentric chart, because over the weekend we had Sun quincunx Uranus, and so Sun quincunx Uranus is pretty much the same as Earth semisextile Uranus, and that can shake things up a little. It can create a little bit of tension. Some people want to get heard; they insist on getting heard, and that can cause a little bit of struggle and strife. But sometimes it's just important to make an impression. But I wouldn't read a huge amount into that Earth semi-sextile Uranus. So I would have said that is the main thing going on at the moment. So it's fairly quiet. You could say, okay, Mercury is moving towards a quincunx of Saturn, and we sort of might experience that over the day. Mercury is the communication planet, so heliocentrically, at times, it may be a bit of a struggle to say what's on our mind, and perhaps we have to use sort of extra force, extra energy, and that can be reflected in the geocentric Mercury trine Mars. But really, there's not a lot going on in that heliocentric chart, I don't think. In fact, there's not a lot going on in the geocentric chart. I mean, there aren't that many aspects. We've got Sun, Moon trine Saturn. We've got Sun decile Pluto. So I'm not sure how much there is to say about today. But anyway, let's see what we can find. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, December the 16th, 2024. Aries. Well, Aries, we have got Mercury coming to a standstill in Sagittarius. And it's now moving forward. And in general, I think that is a good thing for you. I think it allows you to explore your ideas, not be so stuck in some of your ideas. That might have been an issue. What is your stance? What do you believe? And over the last few weeks, some of your beliefs, may have been up in the air and you really didn't want to commit yourself. But now I think you are getting greater clarity, and you're helped by the fact that Mars is making a trine to Mercury. So Mercury coming to a standstill, Mars, your ruler in Leo, Mars, your ruler in Leo, might be retrograde, but still you are starting to find your feet in terms of your opinions. And if something doesn't feel right, then I think that you're going to want to be open about it. And once you start being open, you may not know when to stop. There is, Aries, a certain amount of verbal aggravation here, and perhaps verbal aggression on your part. And if it needs to be pointed out, you'll perhaps take the view that it should be, and you'll be quite forthright. But you do have to consider what you're trying to achieve, and whether you might be causing an excessive amount of harm by saying too much. Particularly now when the moon is in Cancer. With the moon in Cancer, it should be a time when many Arians need to just calm down a little. There is a space for reflection, Aries, and spending time doing things you enjoy, but not necessarily feeling you have to go out of your way to look for action. And if something is new and untested, perhaps you should be suspicious of it. And that includes maybe some of your own opinions. Yes, I understand, Aries, you have strong opinions. And I know that with Mercury going direct, some of these opinions are starting to crystallize. But now may not be the time for really telling everyone what you feel in no uncertain terms. First of all, you've got things to sort out. And, with the moon making a trine to Saturn, do you really need anyone's help? Should you be desperate for anyone's cooperation? I think the answer is probably no. I think you can sort it out on your own, or at least sort it out with your family. Yeah, don't forget your family. I think your family today and perhaps tomorrow as well could be important, and it is perhaps a time to get in touch with them if they're far away. I suppose it's a run up to Christmas, isn't it? And so I suppose at Christmas people start thinking about families, even regardless of their religious beliefs, regardless of whether they take Christmas Day seriously. It's just that kind of time, isn't it, where things do slow to a crawl. And yeah, I suppose I'm perhaps having a certain Western bias here. My apologies for that. But yeah, it is Christmas, and so it is a time when you do have an opportunity to get in touch with your family with that moon trine Saturn. You don't have to make a big deal about it. And so I think, Aries, today you have a little bit of a choice. You could, I suppose, if you wanted, go out sort of all guns blazing, especially on a verbal level. I think with that Mercury trine Mars, you might feel that the universe is giving you permission, that whatever was holding you back has now gone. But I'm feeling that that might not be the right approach. You may not be quite as ready as you think you are. And maybe, Aries, more focus on your home and on security and the people who really matter to you. You might actually be the best approach. But still, I don't want to take away from the fact that you are developing a powerful vision, and it's something that you're feeling, actually starting to feel quite good about. And it's maybe that something is in the process of developing, it's developing well, but do you have to talk about it right now? Perhaps you should just wait a couple of days before really going out on a limb, because today, that moon in Cancer, it should be seen as something relating to security, and perhaps you should make security your priority. Taurus, it's, I think, going to be a fairly comfortable day. We've got the moon moving through Cancer. The moon is making a trine to Saturn, and from a Taurian perspective, the moon is an important body. The moon is exalted in Taurus, so the moon is not quite your ruler, but it almost is, at least by exaltation. And so I think that things are going to be fairly settled, and you're going to be able to talk about yourself, tell people what's on your mind, and you're going to be able to do it in a way that is, fairly sort of relaxed, low profile. I don't think that there are going to be any real surprises today, and surprises is not what you want. You just want to do things according to a particular plan, and it works fine. And I think that you can, in most cases, you can trust your friends, people you meet all the time, people you know well. Again, they're not going to spring any surprises, and they may, in their own way, be perhaps quite useful. And if there's something you need, I think you'll get it. It will be provided. Now, it's true that it can be a relaxing day, but that doesn't necessarily mean a day that has to be uneventful. I mean, you can make it eventful if you want it to be eventful. And we do have your ruler, Venus, is still in Aquarius, still very much in Aquarius. It's still at the beginning of Aquarius, and Venus in Aquarius, does represent your ambitions, and it represents the things you want to achieve, and it also has a link to your self-perception, how you see yourself. And I think you do see yourself as someone who can make things happen. And Mars has finished making an opposition to Venus, and Mars is starting to make an opposition to Pluto, and Venus is 10 degrees from Pluto. So I'm feeling that this Mars is going to reactivate something. And it just may be that today, try as much as you like to be completely relaxed. I think with Mars sort of opposition to Sun-Pluto midpoint, there's still going to be something bothering you. There's going to be something that you feel needs to be done. And you might be a little bit obsessed about it. And it's going to prevent you from being entirely relaxed. I think it can be a relaxing day, but if you start focusing on what you'd like to achieve, and perhaps what you've not been able to achieve recently, you then may realize that just actually something has to be done. And so if you feel sort of a sort of a pang of regret, maybe you're missing out on something, maybe something just has to be sorted out, then I would follow that feeling. Work it out. Don't be too obsessive about it, but there is in some way an opportunity to get in touch with someone who can help, someone who can make things happen. And I suppose what you're really trying to do is put your mind to rest. And so if you really want to be 100% relaxed, it just may be that there's just something that has to be done. And as far as relationships are concerned, Mars is on the Venus-Pluto midpoint. That might have an impact on you. I think that if you're involved with someone very closely, I think the sort of interpersonal feelings are going to be kind of obvious. And there might be a little bit of jealousy. I don't quite know where the jealousy is going to lie. I mean, in a general sense, Mars on the Venus-Pluto midpoint is about jealousy, or could be about jealousy. It could also be about a power struggle. So maybe in terms of relationships, particularly close relationships, there may be a sense of, asking, who has the power, who's in control, who's in charge, and is anything being hidden? And that might be a reality, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to get too obsessed about it. I mean, I think that, yes, you can relax today if you want, but also there is a possibility that you get distracted by emotional stuff which may not be, at least to begin with, relevant, but you might make it relevant. You might make something important, and it's not important, but you start to make an issue of it, and I suppose in the end it becomes an issue. So maybe, Taurus, it's a day when you do have a choice. You can keep it simple, and that might be the best approach. Keep it simple, stick to people you know and trust, don't do anything dramatic, and just have a nice day. You could do that. But there's still this possibility that you decide that you want to go deep into something. And perhaps it all starts with a certain sense of lack. Something needs to be done. Something isn't quite right. Things could be better. And that might be the right thing to do. But if you decide you want to take the initiative, you want to stir things up, you must be ready to deal with the consequences. Though I think in terms of career, business, if you've got something you really want to do, some small thing that's going to put you in a better position before Christmas, then you should be able to do it. But just don't make too much of a drama out of it. Gemini. As I've said on several occasions in the recent past, Mercury is now direct. And from a perspective of a Gemini, that is certainly important because Mercury is your ruling planet. So Mercury has been retrograde for the last few weeks, and Mercury's retrograde motion can have an effect on Gemini. Things just haven't quite gone to plan. I mean, that's not necessarily the case, but it's certainly quite possible. And you may have been disappointed by how slow things were. You'd expected things to have gone a lot further than they had done. But anyway, you can't change the past, and Mercury is now direct, and so Gemini, you may have a feeling that things are now returning to normal, and you're able to make things happen, things that couldn't happen in the past. And Mercury, when it goes direct, is making a trine to Mars, and so it is kind of a Mercury trine Mars today, and I think Gemini, there could be a lot of activity, a lot of things you want to say, a lot of things you want to do, and you maybe don't want to stay in one place, and there could be a sense that you perhaps want to do a lot of short journeys, make a lot of phone calls. It's almost like perhaps that you're catching up on lost ground, and you want to do it all quickly. And it's a Monday anyway, it's the beginning of the week, so you take the view it's time to get going. And I think you would probably be right, and you can certainly cover a lot of ground, but it's important that you don't spread yourself too thinly. You can't do everything at once. So perhaps you should focus, Gemini, on the things that matter most. So if something is undone, is a problem, has been bugging you recently, just focus on that. Just one or two things, and that should be enough. Now, the moon is in Cancer, and it is making a trine to Saturn. That moon trine Saturn, for you, I believe, could be quite favourable. It's quite a materialistic trine. I mean, I know that there are no planets in Earth signs at the moment, except for Uranus, but Uranus at the moment is always in Taurus. It won't go into Gemini until at some stage next year. But although there aren't any planets in Earth signs, I still think that this moon trine Saturn does relate to the material world and your relationship to it. Sometimes Geminis can be a little too abstract. They like to look at things theoretically, and they don't really want to get their hands dirty. But with this moon trine Saturn, it does seem that there are things that you would like to do of a material nature that may relate to money or work or perhaps business, and you want to get involved. And certainly if you do anything connected with money today, I think it will be successful. Not successful in a spectacular way, but in that moon trine Saturn kind of way. Things can be resolved. Things can be put on a stable footing. So if there's anything financially that's bothering you at the moment, then I think you can do something about it. You can just make it simpler, and you can find answers. And also your concern about money and making sure the books balance may be appreciated, particularly if you're working and your work is connected with money, or I suppose it could be about the financial side of any business you're involved with. I think you'll be good. You'll know what matters, and I think actually your attention to detail will be appreciated, and perhaps it will be appreciated all the more because there aren't any planets except for Uranus in Earth signs. People don't really want to get involved with the financial nitty-gritty of things, but you're okay with it at the moment with that moon trine Saturn. So depending on the situation, it may be a good opportunity to impress people, particularly if, for example, your employers or your workmates. And in terms of personal finance, I do think that there are definitely things that you can do to make things easier for yourself and for you to be more comfortable about your financial situation. Turning to relationships, I think there's a possibility that you can get on with people quite well, and I suppose it's to an extent connected with the fact that Mercury is moving direct. Remember, Mercury is in Sagittarius, so it's in your opposite sign. It's in a sign very much connected with relationships, and with Mercury retrograde, it just may have felt that certain relationships weren't necessarily going anywhere. Other people might have been unreliable, and it was difficult to know what people were thinking and what people were planning. But now Mercury is direct, then I think you can be clearer, and I think that it's a time to get on with people, whoever they are. I think that if you make an effort to talk to someone, even if you don't know them very well, I think you can make a good impression. And of course, talking can be a phone call, it can be something you do on the internet, making connections over the internet, that's certainly possible. And Mercury is trine Mars, and so with Mercury trine Mars, this allows you to be quite forthcoming. You can tell people what's on your mind, and if something hasn't been said, you can be the person to say it. Very often, Gemini is the mouth. Gemini is the person that says the words that no one else wants to say. And if you're in that kind of situation, then understand your role. You are being cast in a role, and you may be the person that can make things happen because you're prepared to speak up. And it's not that you have to say anything dramatic. It's not that you have to upset anyone or get involved in an argument. It's just perhaps just saying what's obvious, and no one else realizes it, or people are too afraid to say what's obvious. You say what's obvious, and then everything starts to move. Cancer. Cancer, the main aspect today is, I think, a trine aspect between the moon in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces. I don't think there's much else going on. And so, that means moon obviously in your star sign, or your star sign, if you are looking at this reading from a perspective of your sun sign. It could be your ascendant sign, or it could be your moon sign. People sometimes ask in the comments, in terms of these 12 signs, should I look at my sun sign? Should I look at my ascendant sign? Should I look at my moon sign? Well, it is up to you, and I don't like to say there's anything that you should do, but certainly if you have got your sun in Cancer, then the moon is moving through your star sign, but it may be just moving through your rising sign or your moon sign. But it's great having moon in Cancer, and it particularly if it's trine Saturn, it puts you back in control. And if you're feeling in control, that gives you a certain amount of confidence. You just feel that there aren't going to be any unpleasant surprises, that you understand what's going on, and your emotions are being very helpful. They're letting you know what's going on. They're giving you advance warning of any problems. And with moon trine Saturn, it's about finding security, but at the same time finding new possibilities. And it's great when you can get that, because very often we see a dichotomy between adventure and security. We see them as somehow being different. New information, new realizations can perhaps undermine your security. At least that's how we sometimes see it. But not in this case. I think that discovering new things about the world is completely compatible with your own security interests. And so I really don't think that it is the case that ignorance is bliss. Yes, ignorance can be bliss, and sometimes there are things it's best that we just don't know about them. And, that can actually be a Cancerian trait. Sometimes Cancerians can almost have studied ignorance. I'm not talking about you personally. I've just something I have noticed. There can be a certain studied interest, a studied ignorance to Cancerians. They deliberately try to avoid certain information, certain knowledge. But again, not today. I think that the more you know, the more you understand, the more secure you'll be. And I think that one reason for this might be, Cancer, is actually because you're getting confirmation. You feel things. You feel things to be the case. And so as you then actually discover what the world is really like, and your discoveries just confirm what you already know. And knowledge can take many forms. It can be just, I suppose, factual knowledge, but it can be knowledge about the way things are working. That's absolutely possible. Or the way injustice is unfolding. Or it can be something quite spiritual, just understanding what it's all about, having a certain sense of your destiny, and just feeling relaxed, just feeling that you're doing the right thing, and that there's nothing much to worry about, or even feeling that something is looking after you. And that this moon trine Saturn might also have an impact on relationships, and how you get on with people. I think it allows you actually to get on with people extremely well. Certainly in terms of the people closest to you, you just feel that you are on the same wavelength, and that you're perhaps getting the kind of reassurances you need. And so I think in that sense, people can be trusted, particularly people you know well. I mean, I'm not saying that you should always trust people absolutely. There's always a scope for being let down. But I don't think today that's going to happen. I just think that you're quite aware of what's going on, you're emotionally aware, and you're attracting people who are going to look after your own interests. So overall, Cancer, I think it could actually be a satisfying and reassuring day. Leo, you are having some thoughts about the world and perhaps about yourself, which may be a little bit disturbing. I mean, it could be a sense of realization. Your eyes are open, and your mind is interpreting what you see. And as far as you're concerned, things, at least under the surface, are disturbing, yes. And you perhaps are becoming aware of certain aspects of human nature which aren't necessarily very appealing. And also there is a certain fascination there. You kind of want to know more. And it may be that this works on quite a trivial level. So you might find yourself just interested in stories about crime and the evil that men do. I suppose women do as well. And that can be something that... something a little bit obsessive, I suppose. If you're spending a lot of time on the internet, and you might be looking at news stories about human behavior and wanting to know more, and having a certain fascination with the dark side of human life and human experience. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, it's always good to have a realistic understanding of human nature and not to assume that people are pleasant. most people at some level aren't particularly pleasant. That's just the way it is, but maybe you don't want to dwell on it too much. Maybe you might enjoy dwelling on it. That is possible. And today with the moon in Cancer, many Leos are not being entirely open about what they're doing, and there are things they want to keep to themselves, and you don't want to sort of tell everyone what you're interested in right now, and perhaps that's for the best. You can be secretive, and sometimes it's absolutely fine to be secretive. The moon is not going to move into Leo for a few days, so maybe while the moon is kind of waiting to move into Leo in Cancer, in quite a secretive part of your chart, maybe you can just drift on. So that is a possibility. Yet I don't think that's something that you entirely want to do. Drifting. I don't think drifting, you entirely want to drift, because there is a decile between the Sun and Pluto. So that means that the Sun and Pluto are 36 degrees apart, and 36 degrees is 1/10 of the circle. And so with that Sun decile Pluto, if you're honest with yourself, you may feel that you don't have enough power, that you don't have enough control. And you might then think, well, what do you actually need to do in order to get the kind of control you're looking for? And internally you have a vision. You have a vision about the way it could be, about the kind of control you could have. And at the same time, you realize it's not going to be easy. But the decile exists for a reason. If you make the effort, you can turn your thoughts into reality, and you can start to assert control in a way that I think works in your favor. It can be done, but it's going to take a bit of effort. And maybe, I was talking about at the beginning of this piece on Leo, that I was talking about your concern about things which might be underhand, dark, criminal, the dark side of human nature. Maybe this is actually all part of it. Maybe you have to actually understand other people's darkness in order to take control. So, from a psychological perspective, there may be people you have to deal with. Maybe you have to get the better of them. And perhaps if you want to get the better of someone, you need to know what makes them tick, and you perhaps need to have some understanding of the darkness within their soul. And if you can work that out, if you can sort of psychologically understand the key to someone, then that might allow you to put yourself in a position where you start to have real power. Virgo, Mercury is now direct. It sort of went stationary direct sort of maybe yesterday if you're in the Americas, or in Europe. It could be later if you're in Australasia. But Mercury going direct is certainly something to welcome. It means that you have a sense that things are maybe returning to normal, that sort of recently there have been a few problems, hiccups. Things haven't moved as fast as you would have liked them to move. And there may have been delays. But now things are moving back to normal. So you can start to consider the future, and you can start to make plans and be reasonably confident that you're going to be able to carry those plans out, that you're going to be able to put them into action. And so Virgo, don't be afraid to be dynamic. And it's possible that in order to carry out your plans, you may need other people's help. And perhaps in the past, you thought that help simply wasn't available. Well, now that help is becoming available. And today, if you reach out to other people, I think that in most cases you're going to get a fairly sympathetic reception. People will be interested in what you have to say, and where necessary, they will be prepared to help. And also, Virgo, it just may be a time to just be making new connections, even if that connection is in the short term isn't useful. It's perhaps a good opportunity to, I don't know, enlarge your address book, increase the number of contacts you have, and perhaps that's a good way of setting yourself up for not just the week, but maybe for the year ahead, because I suppose 2024 is now drawing to a close. I mean, it's December the 16th, which is the mid-month in December, isn't it? If December has 31 days, and December the 16th is right in the middle of it. So I think Mercury going direct is very useful for you, and I think it's useful in a social sense. And I should also point out that Mercury is making a trine to Mars, and this trine to Mars is particularly important, particularly powerful, should I say, because Mercury is not moving very fast. And so when Mercury is not moving very fast, it's kind of stuck on the trine to Mars. And so that allows you to, I think, be assertive in terms of what you say. And the things you say can have a big influence from a big distance, from a long distance. So just because you are not in the middle of things, you may be quite separate. You may want to be separate. You may want to be isolated at some level. Even then, you can have an influence. But I think you should try not to be isolated, because the moon is making a trine to Saturn. The moon is in Cancer. The moon is pretty sociable, and Saturn is in Pisces. It's in your opposite sign. Saturn is about relationships. So moon trine Saturn is about not just strengthening relationships, but also realizing which people can be helpful, which people can be useful, and perhaps realizing that people can be useful in different ways. And someone who seems to be a bit of a pain, someone who you might be a bit wary of, perhaps because you regard them as being too much like hard work, even then they can be helpful. Maybe someone is prepared to go out of their way to help you out, and you kind of weren't expecting it. And all you have to do is ask. So ask someone for a favour, and it may actually be quite a big favour, and you may be pleasantly surprised with the response. Libra, you feel right now that there are things that need to be done, that it won't necessarily wait, and that means that you're not going to want to just sort of sit and watch the world go by, sit and watch the clouds go by. That's not what you're going to want to do. I mean, it might be nice to do that. It might be easy, but I don't think you'll feel comfortable about it. And it is a time, Libra, where you need to make an impression. Indeed, where you can make an impression. And you will understand what needs to be done. And also, Libra, I think you're going to have a pretty good sense of self-discipline. You'll know that time is precious, and you'll also know what needs to be sorted out by particular deadlines. And so there could be a certain sense of hurry there. Not manic hurry, just feeling that you have to get things done, and you'll be helped by the fact that you're going to be able to project a very sort of positive and at the same time sympathetic image, which people are really going to go for. People will regard you as someone who is pleasant and nurturing and reliable, and in most cases they're going to do things your way. So if you make suggestions, then I think people are not going to complain. They're just going to get on with it. So that means, Libra, if you have any position of authority or leadership, you can use this position, and I think that you'll be very effective. And even if you don't have a position of authority and leadership, you can perhaps develop one, at least for today. So if you believe that something needs to be done, then just tell people about it. And I do think that in most cases they're going to listen and not question you too much. Now, turning to relationships, I think that if we're talking about people that you know well, that are close to you, the situation might be slightly complicated, because Mars, which is the planet that rules your opposite sign of Aries, is opposition Venus and it's opposition Pluto. Now, Venus and Mars have been opposition for some time. Mars has been opposition Pluto for some time. In fact, that seems to be something rather distant. It sort of represents the past almost. But the thing is that today Mars is halfway between the opposition to Pluto and the opposition to Venus. So in other words, Mars is on the Venus-Pluto midpoint. And so that may say something about partners, lovers, spouses, anyone who I suppose you have a very, very close friendship with, not just a casual friendship, something very close. And with Mars on the Venus-Pluto midpoint, that can represent emotional intensity, and it can represent jealousy, and also a struggle for power. And so in close relationships, it may feel that there is a power struggle and that someone is really quite intent on being in control. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you have to cede control, not at all. Cede, as in C-E-D-E, as in a cessation. That doesn't mean you have to. Mars may be playing power games, so another person may be playing power games, but you have to remember Mars is retrograde. And so if you do find that someone is throwing their weight around, it could be a last hurrah. It could be someone who is in a position where they know that they're losing power. They're not as powerful as they used to be, but they're having to make something of a demonstration of it. So while I think this more relates to close relationships, I suppose it could happen anywhere. Just about one person claiming that they have a lot of authority. But in a way, I think they might be a paper tiger. Scary on the surface, but if you actually go close, it's not as impressive as it looks. So don't be overawed by anyone who is trying to push you around or is trying to assert control over you. It seems impressive on the surface, but actually it may be something that you can actually deal with very easily. Scorpio, I was just talking to Libra about the fact that Mars was opposition Pluto and opposition Venus. In fact, that Mars was on the Venus-Pluto midpoint. And of course, Mars is your ruler. And so that configuration could affect you. It could even describe you. And I think, Scorpio, it may be a time where power is quite important to you. But you have to ask yourself, power for what reason? And I understand that Scorpios do like to be in control, and they sometimes want to assert their control, and they don't want to feel that anyone else is having an undue influence over them. So with Mars on the Venus-Pluto midpoint, you may be tempted to assert yourself in a way that may not be entirely appropriate. You may go too far, perhaps because you're too desperate to assert yourself. That could be the case, and the more emotional your response is, the more difficult it will be. It's not a day when emotional responses which are based on jealousy and intensity and concerns about power, it's not a day when that can be useful. So I think, Leo, in some respects, Scorpio, I think, Scorpio, you do need to calm down a little and not take things too seriously. You can still be in control, but you don't want to see it as a matter of life and death. You have to ask yourself, where is it necessary to be in control? Where do you need to assert yourself? And you certainly can assert yourself. You know, Mercury is trine Mars. Mercury is just gone direct, and it's trine Mars, which is your ruler. So make sure if you've got a situation where you feel you want to assert yourself, make sure that you can describe your intentions and what your end result is. Can you describe it simply? I want this, therefore I'm going to assert myself. That's fine. If you're asserting yourself for some complex, emotional, scorpionic reason, I said that's not going to work. So, on a positive note, this Mercury trine Mars could be quite useful from a financial perspective. So if there's something you want financially, you can assert yourself, and you can quite likely you can actually get what you're looking for. And it may just be a question of asking for it. And from a verbal perspective, Scorpio, you can be very effective, but just use straightforward language, and don't come over as being angry. Don't come over as if you're being intense or you're hiding something. Just keep it as simple as possible, Scorpio, and then I think that things should work. And also consider the positives. Today there is a trine aspect between the Moon and Saturn. And the Moon is in Cancer, Saturn is in Pisces. So in a way, that Moon trine Saturn has an effect on Scorpio. You know, the Moon is kind of trining Scorpio. Saturn is also trining Scorpio. So with Moon trine Saturn, it might be about getting something together, something you are working on that's important to you, and you know it's hard work, but it matters, and it's perhaps an essential part of who you are, and it may be something that you've been engaged on for some time, maybe since the beginning of 2023. And with this Moon trine Saturn, you do have a chance to really get things going, to do some really useful work. And it's not about power or intensity or control, because it may well be that it has nothing to do with anyone else. If you want to be intense, and if you want to worry about issues of power, then maybe focus on what you are trying to achieve in your own private world. And then any power struggle is not between you and another person, it's between you and whatever you're working on. And it is a struggle, but it's a struggle where you can be successful when you have a powerful vision of what you're trying to achieve. And I think you're going to be helped by the fact that the sun is making a decile to Pluto. So the Sun in Aquarius is making a 36-degree aspect to Pluto, and this gives you a powerful vision of fundamentally what you are trying to achieve. And you have a vision of how difficult it is, but you also have a vision of how possible it is. And so it may be, Scorpio, that you don't have to worry about other people at all today. You can just focus on your own challenges, the things that are important to you. And when you're not disturbed, when you're doing things your way, there's no one to blame. And if you keep going, there's no reason why you can't make some really good progress. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, it's a time when you may feel that there are things you don't fully understand. You know, you'd like things to be clear, but I don't think they are clear. And the more you try to understand them, in a way, the less clear they are. And so perhaps, Sagittarius, you're seeing things in the wrong way. Perhaps you're trying to make things out as if they can be simple and that you can just understand them and move on. You can perhaps get the information you're looking for and then move on. But it's not quite like that. I think that there are things, Sagittarius, that right now you have to grapple with. And you have to grapple with them in your own way. And it doesn't matter how much you read, how much you talk, it's not going to help. You can only do it on a sort of an intuitive, emotional level. Working with yourself, listening to your heart. I don't even necessarily think it is an intuitive level. I think it's actually a purely emotional level. You work on an emotional level, and it's perhaps not something you feel entirely comfortable with, but in the end, you do start to make a little bit of progress, and you benefit, I think, from the fact that the moon is making a trine to Saturn, and that moon trine Saturn it's in water signs. It is about structuring your feelings and perhaps structuring other people's feelings, a whole sort of emotional soup in which you're swimming. You know, it can be difficult to work it out, but that moon trine Saturn is, I think, going to give you clues. And at some stage, I think it will make sense. But you may have to sort of dig deep, and you certainly can't be satisfied with things that are just on the surface, and that's not possible. So a bit of complexity today. Well, not something you want, but I still think that complexity could actually be quite useful. And as far as other things going on, Mercury is making a trine to Mars. So that gives a rather different view of the day. Mercury is in Sagittarius. It's still in Sagittarius, but Mercury is going stationary direct, and it's making a trine to Mars. And it may be about communication and being able to understand other people. Yes, you've got your own work to do. You've got something to understand that is really hard to understand. But in terms of other people, there are people to talk to. There are people that want to talk to you, and there are people that want your attention, and you may not want to give them your attention, but I think it's probably worth your while. So if someone is trying to get through to you and you know that really you need to talk to them, then I think you should, because it just may be that someone has got something to say. Perhaps you haven't been in contact with them recently because Mercury has been retrograde, but now things are starting to return to normal. So if someone wants to come back into your life, wants to come back into circulation, I think you should at least hear what they have to say, because the things they say might be quite significant, and I think at the very least you need to give yourself a chance to understand what they're saying, and also give yourself a chance to react to their words. So overall today, I think it's a day when you don't need to be in circulation, you don't need to be out and about, but if anyone wants to be in touch, I think you should at least hear them out. Capricorn, the moon is in Cancer, it's in your opposite sign, and it is making a trine to Saturn. And that means that with the moon in Cancer, that means, well, what does it mean? It means that you may have to pay more attention than usual to what's happening in the outside world. I understand that you would like to be in control. You'd like to be the ones making the decision. You'd like to be the one making the decision. But with moon in Cancer, the other person has to be considered. Not just the other person, just all of those outside forces which you don't have full control of, which are perhaps a law unto themselves. They all have to be considered. And it shouldn't be a problem. I know that it might be best if you were making all the decisions, but with Moon trine Saturn, because Moon in Cancer making a trine to Saturn in Pisces, I think it's a time when you can benefit from other people, and I think that you can also make your position clear. So there's always a sense of to and fro. So understanding what another person is saying, what they want, and at the same time telling them what you want, and that shouldn't be a problem. And I think that over the day there's a lot of scope for agreement, and I think it's unlikely that you're going to get yourself into a situation where there's a complete breakdown because different people want different things and there's just absolutely no scope for compromise. No, I think with that Moon trine Saturn, there's a possibility of resolution, and actually realizing that there is a sense of mutual interest. You help someone, they help you, and you've got things in common. And I think in general, you will benefit from other people, from the company around you. And in the end, you are the one who is in control, because you just have a certain sort of maturity about you, and you can just explain things in a very sort of straightforward, simple way, and it will just be quite obvious. So I don't think you're going to have any problems getting your way, and if you use your words correctly, then I think that people will just they will listen, they will give you their feedback, and you'll be able to adjust your approach to take into account other people's needs. But I do think that in the end, things will run smoothly. And as far as close relationships are concerned, I think there is a lot of scope for agreement. I think that existing relationships should work well. I think there's also good communication. Of course, good communication is always important, and I think it's a time of sort of understanding. So in many respects, Capricorn, it's really a very straightforward day, and I don't see anything particularly difficult or problematic happening. Yet you may have a certain sense about what is right and what is appropriate and what is possible, more so than other people. And yes, people have ideas. People are imaginative. They think that certain things might be possible, and I suppose they don't know any better. But if you actually listen to what people are saying and what people are planning, it may occur to you that some people are not really being realistic. And you're going to be very good, Capricorn, at bringing people down to earth. You understand what's possible. You, of all people, understand the difference between fantasy and reality. I mean, that's a trait you have anyway, but today it's going to be particularly strong. And so, Capricorn, if you need to bring people down to earth and explain to them what is possible, then that's certainly something you can do. And taking that one step further, there is something about you that is quite authoritative. You just have a natural authority to you. And I suppose the nature of that authority is maybe sort of twofold. On one hand, you have the knowledge and the experience. You are entitled to that authority. But at the same time, because the moon is in Cancer, because the moon is in your opposite sign, because you understand that other people can't be ignored, other people's needs can't be ignored, you can tailor your authority to fit the people who you are trying to lead, who you're trying to have authority over. You can't just tell people what to do. You know that. You have to consider their weaknesses, their aspirations, and that's just something you're going to be really good at the moment. And that's just going to make it very easy for you to be an effective leader, effective manager, whatever you want to be. And if you don't feel that you have any authority, well, maybe think again. Regardless of the situation, you can demonstrate authority, but in such a way that no one's going to be offended. Aquarius, you probably want to keep things simple. There's no need for excessive drama, and you want to be able to really be able to know how things are going to pan out in advance. And I think today good planning is going to be important. And it might seem rather boring, but I think fundamentally you understand that it does matter. And what allows this to happen is a trine aspect between the moon and Saturn. So moon is in Cancer, very sensible sign for the moon to be in. Saturn is, of course, your ruler, so when moon is trine Saturn, that allows you, Aquarius, to just organize things, to have an idea about where things should be placed and what's possible, what's not possible, and yes, having a plan. And if you have a plan for the day, then I think that plan should run very smoothly. And it may be the case also that your preparations can save you money. So if you have to deal with something on the spur of a moment, particularly if money is involved, whether you're buying something, selling something, in some kind of having some kind of discussion about money, or trying to negotiate about money, if you're not prepared, then your lack of preparation could have a cost. On the other hand, if you are prepared, it's going to make all the difference, and that can be a way in which you can really maximize your sort of earning power, perhaps, or your power just to, I don't know, get the most. Whatever you feel the universe owes you, you should be able to get the maximum possible through some careful preparation. Now, as far as control and power is concerned, there is a decile between the Sun and Pluto. So Sun and Pluto are 36 degrees apart. And the Sun may be representative of another person, perhaps someone you could be in conflict with them, or you could be in competition with them. And Sun decile Pluto may represent another person's planning. Now, I've talked about your planning, and yes, I think that you are capable of very good planning at the moment. But also, other people can make plans as well. It's like playing chess, isn't it? I mean, I know how to play chess. You can play chess online. I'm a pretty terrible chess player, but one thing about chess is that it's very easy to be completely egocentric about it, particularly at a low level. Like obviously, me playing at a low level, I'm not a good chess player. But you can kind of assume that you're the only person making plans, and it doesn't occur to you that the other person you're playing against is making plans as well. And I mean, I know it's obvious, but it's easy to forget that because one tends to be so egocentric. And so you have to consider the possibility that other people are planning, that other people have a particular agenda that they're not revealing. And just being aware of that, ask yourself, what is another person's motive? Because it's so easy to be totally subjective, to only think about things from your own point of view, to think that you're the center of the universe and you're the only one who's got plans. Yeah, someone else is planning something, and you perhaps have to think about what that plan actually is. So do consider that. I think it's when I was in Slovakia, again, not only was I bad at chess, I was bad at languages, but I think there was this verb in the Slovak verb which was something like speculovat. It was used quite commonly, this word, and it's not just to speculate, it's also about planning and someone trying to get an advantage for themselves. And so think about that. Think about how people are speculating and what is going on in their minds. And yeah, you're not the only one who is speculating, who is trying to sort things out and make things work out as best as possible for yourself. Other people are doing the same thing. And just by being aware of that, I think you'd be doing yourself a favor. Pisces, the moon is in Cancer, and from a Pisces perspective, it's very nice having the moon in Cancer, particularly when the moon is trine Saturn. So with Saturn in Pisces, moon in Cancer, it just feels that you are in the right place, and you're very much able to be yourself, and you can do fun stuff. So if you want to do something that you enjoy, then do it. Don't feel obliged to do something boring. And if you're going to do something you enjoy, just make sure you do it well. Give it everything you've got. It's not a day for half measures, particularly in the enjoyment department. But I'm not talking about empty pleasures. I'm talking about pleasures that are fundamental to yourself, that are of lasting value and perhaps are of creative value as well. So do make sure that you put yourself first, and make sure that you just give it everything you've got. And while it's true that you are the person that matters, you should be putting yourself at the center of your universe, you do have to consider other people, and you have to consider the fact that, or the possibility that other people are experiencing a process of change. And that is because Mercury is stationary direct. So now that Mercury has gone stationary, and it went stationary, could have gone stationary direct today if you're in Asia or parts of Asia or Australia or New Zealand, or it could have been yesterday if you're in Europe or the Americas or Africa. Mercury is direct, and so that means that some people are going to be more decisive, and they're going to perhaps be in a position to make up their mind about something. So if you have found other people irritating over the last few weeks, they didn't seem to have any clear sense of direction, well, things are changing, and I think that things are changing for the better, and certain people are going to be a lot more decisive than they have been of late, especially as Mercury is not just going stationary direct, it's going stationary direct trine Mars. And so you perhaps may have made an assumption that someone didn't have an opinion on something. They might have said, oh yeah, do what you like, fine, doesn't matter. Now you need to reconsider the situation. Maybe someone does have an opinion. So if you are in the process of doing something which affects other people, and you had assumed that other people couldn't care less what you do, then perhaps you need to revisit your assumptions. And it would be a very good idea to ask someone a second time. So if someone has told you something over the last few weeks, then go back to them and say, is this what you mean? Is this what you wanted? Maybe they'll just confirm it, but you might find that recently there has been a change of mind, because you don't want to have any sort of difficulty or unpleasantness just for no reason. Just the mere process of consultation could be really appreciated. Going to someone, asking them if they're okay, asking them what they want. Yeah, you'll be showing that you care. You'll be showing that you are treating them as human beings, that you are taking into account their opinions. So yeah, don't ignore other people, especially if your decisions or actions could affect them. But I go back to what I said at the beginning of this piece. You are the person that matters, Pisces. And in most cases, you should just do what you enjoy and make the most of it, and just don't give in to empty pleasures. Enjoyment has different levels. We're talking about something that is your enjoyment. It's not something that necessarily other people are going to enjoy. It's something that is special to you. And with Moon trine Saturn, you can make it real, and perhaps you can create something which is productive. Not just fun and creative, but productive. It actually makes something. It makes something real, and that's something you really can do today. As far as the I Ching is concerned, because now it's time to look at Monday from the perspective of the I Ching. Well, I sort of ask the question. I do have to ask a question here. I write it down, because when you're doing the I Ching, you have to be specific. You have to really tell the I Ching what you want to know, and that's why it's important to write it down. I actually think in terms of any form of divination, whatever you're doing, whether it's astrology, whether it's the I Ching or the tarot, if you have a question, write it down beforehand, and because wording can matter. And some questions are really not appropriate. A really bad question is, should I do this? I mean, that is a terrible question. Whatever divinatory method you're using, should I? Well, who knows? And at what level is the divination going to be working? The divination may not care less about your short-term happiness. It might be should I from a perspective of, I don't know, many incarnations. It may be it's the right thing for you to do something which is a complete disaster because you might learn from the experience. So you do have to really be careful of in terms of asking should questions. But anyway, the question I asked is, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 53, which is development. It's about slow development. It's about things moving at a very gradual pace, and we shouldn't be in a hurry. And the image that the I Ching likes to use is of a bird sort of sometimes going higher and higher, and how its flight path develops. And we have the first line moving and the third line moving. So the first line moving is indicating that we're on a path, but we're at the beginning of the path, and we are not entirely familiar with what's going on. And the imagery is of a sort of a youth. It doesn't have any experience, doesn't have much knowledge, is just beginning. Or even a child. And because of that inexperience, there is an incredible amount of vulnerability. And yes, we might be starting to find our feet, we might be starting to understand what's going on, but we're not experienced. We don't fully know what we're doing. So there is a sense of danger here. The danger of experience, the danger of being in a new situation. And so we have to be really, really careful. It's not saying that we're going to fall for this danger. We just have to be aware of it. And the problems of moving too fast, too far, are illustrated by the third line. Third line moves. Third line, very often in I Ching, represents a problem. And the danger with the third line is we take things too far. We go too quickly, and we take something on which is far beyond our own ability, and we're lost, and things could go wrong really quickly. So looking at the first line and the third line together, we're in a situation where we might plunge ahead thinking we can sort it out, and we can't. So this means that absolute caution is necessary. We have to take things very slowly, and we shouldn't make assumptions about our own abilities or the abilities of perhaps other people we're cooperating with. It needs to be done slowly because danger is lurking, and there is going to be that temptation to take things too far, too quickly, and that could really wreck everything. Now, because we've got two lines moving, we move to a second hexagram, and it moves to hexagram 42, which is increase. Now, this is not such a bad hexagram, and it does represent increase. Not necessarily increase in money, but increase in sort of knowledge or experience, and we can sort of benefit from the situation. So this might be advising us on how to deal with the previous hexagram of development. We should be patient because we should know that in the end we're doing something which will work in our favor. We don't have to be in a hurry. We don't have to I don't know, make Rome in a day, build Rome in a day. We certainly don't. But what if things go wrong? I mean, going back to development, what if we do rush ahead? And what if it is a complete disaster? what if we lose something? What if, if something gets completely wrecked? Which I think could happen. In that case, maybe it's the right thing. Because what perhaps is happening is that we are wrecking something that maybe we just don't need anymore. We're pushing something to destruction. And, with the following hexagram of increase, the increase is saying, well, if you want to increase, you have to decrease. You have to let go of something. And so perhaps in the previous hexagram, we might be pushing something to destruction in order to let go of it, to just let ourselves know that that wasn't a useful direction. We let go of it, and that leads to something else. So that leads to the possibility of growth and, yes, of increase, of getting something. That's one way of looking at it. On the other hand, if we don't push something to destruction, if we just hold back, which is probably what the I Ching is asking us to do with this hexagram decrease, if we just hold back, we understand our limitations, we're not rash, we exercise incredible discipline, and we resist the temptation to plunge ahead. If we can do that, then we can move to hexagram 42 after a time of delay, perhaps feeling a bit frustrated that things aren't moving fast enough. If we can do that, in the end, we can move to increase, and our patience will be rewarded. We will get what we're looking for. Yes, we might have to give something up in the process, but that's very often the case, isn't it? And finally, I want to look at Harry and Meghan. I know that it can be a controversial subject. Some people think that Meghan is wonderful. I've been watching a few videos about Meghan recently, as one does, and she is losing support. Apparently it has been a bad year for her, but we need to keep an open mind. And I suppose we better start by looking at Meghan's chart. Well, Meghan's chart, maybe we should look at the marriage chart first. So that would be a good place to start. So marriage charts do matter. People can get married with terrible charts and the marriage can be fine. So it's not the only thing. I suppose when people are getting married, there are different things you have to consider. You have to, I suppose, well, in fact, getting married is a very straightforward bureaucratic process. It shouldn't cost you more than, it shouldn't cost you more than $100 or £150 or something like that. It should be quick. You don't need all this stuff like flowers and venues and whatever. In fact, you could argue that the less money you put into a marriage, the better the chance of it working, because there aren't expectations. But I suppose if you are spending a lot of money on a marriage, I suppose you have to buy the flowers and the venue and everything else. And well, if you're doing that, you might as well pay for an astrologer as well. That's one thing you might want to consider, making sure that all things being equal, you want to get married on a good day. So looking at the chart of Harry's marriages, Harry and Meghan's marriage. This is just an update. I just wanted to look at, what is happening at the moment. It does seem that they're getting more news coverage, at least on social media. People are wheeling out their criticisms again. You don't see so much in terms of anything positive about them. That in itself is interesting, isn't it? But here's the chart of their wedding, and so they were married May the 19th, 2018. I've got 12:39 p.m. in Windsor Castle, and there's the chart. And what's interesting about this chart is Mars square Uranus. There's Mars at 1 degree 15 Aquarius, and there's Uranus at 0 degrees Taurus. That's tough, Mars square Uranus. The marriage has a certain willfulness to it. It almost has a certain violence there. I mean, I don't mean necessarily, I don't mean physical violence, but it's stubborn, it's willful, it's there to cause trouble, and that is one aspect of this marriage. And I suppose the moon is making a sextile, making a sextile to the sun. It's good to have moon sextile sun. You know, the moon is in Cancer in its own sign, and the sun is in Taurus, the exaltation of the moon. So you know that's nice, that moon sextile sun. But that Mars square Uranus is certainly interesting, and then there's the midheaven, 23 degrees 38 Taurus. So, you know, this is an update. You know, what is going on with their marriage, and so at the moment today, Uranus is at 24 degrees 5 Taurus. So that means that Uranus is moving back onto the midheaven. So this whole year, 2024, Uranus has been on the midheaven, has been transiting the marriage midheaven, and it's continuing to transit the marriage's midheaven. And the midheaven in a marriage, particularly this kind of marriage, is, you know, where the marriage is going. You know, Harry and Meghan, you know, they've really seen it as some kind of business thing, you know, them doing stuff on Netflix, them as a couple going to America to make money. So there is a sort of a business sense in terms of this marriage, and so midheaven would be where the marriage is going. And so with Uranus on the midheaven, this would suggest real turbulence about the direction of a marriage and the marriage as a business plan. And there are real sort of frustrations here that I think we can definitely see, and at least if the commenters are right, you know, from a business perspective, both of them have. It's not really working, and I think that, you know, people are talking a lot about the latest Netflix disaster. I don't want to go into details because I don't really know the details. I'm not particularly interested in Netflix, but so I'm told. But Uranus on the midheaven is certainly causing problems. And now we've got Pluto. Pluto has gone into Aquarius. And so Pluto was already making a square to Uranus, but now Pluto is about to make a conjunction to Mars. Pluto is kind of on the Mars semi-square, the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So Pluto and Uranus together, you would have thought, would be causing a lot of damage. And Pluto on the marriage's Mars may indicate some kind of power struggle. I mean, it's perhaps more likely to impact Harry than Meghan, because it's Mars being a male planet. So in terms of transits, it's not great. But, you know, it's not the end of the world. I mean, marriages go through all sorts of things. And Uranus hasn't really finished yet, because the marriage has its sun at 28-27 Taurus. So what that means is that Uranus next year, as it goes, it will, having made the conjunction to the midheaven, Uranus will move on to conjunct the sun. So I think from a transit perspective, there is evidence here that the marriage is under a lot of pressure, certainly from Uranus and Pluto. So that's certainly happening. I mean, there'll be some short-term transits as well. I mean, Mars is going back into Cancer. The moon is in Cancer, so I suppose there'll be a time when does Mars go direct? Mars goes retrograde, and it goes direct at 17 Cancer. So in January, Mars will be on the marriage's moon. But that's a short-term thing, I suppose. It's perhaps not that much to worry about. So That's an update on the chart of the marriage. Then there's Meghan to consider, and I looked at her chart quite recently, and so we have to think about Meghan, and I think a good place to start is Meghan's solar return. Now there was her 2023. I remember she had a 2023 solar return. God, it's over a year since I've been looking at her chart. But if you look at her 2023 solar return, which finished, of course, that finished last August. But I noticed with her 2023 solar return, if I've got this right. In her 2023 solar return, which finished last August, she had Saturn on the descendant, and one would obviously, with Saturn on a descendant, speculate about whether this was the year when the marriage was going to come to an end. Of course, a lot of people are speculating about how long the marriage is going to last for. I mean, they've been speculating for a long time, but that is quite grim as far as relationships are concerned. Now, it may be that this was a year when she realized that Harry wasn't for her. I mean, that's absolutely possible. But at the same time, Saturn, she might have realized that she was lumbered with him, at least in the short term. Saturn on the descendant, and in terms of the relationship between Harry and Meghan, as far as I'm concerned, the most important piece of negative synastry between Harry and Meghan is Harry's Saturn and her Sun. So if you look at Harry's chart, Harry has his Saturn at 12 degrees 51 Scorpio. And going to Meghan's chart, she has got her Sun at 12 degrees Leo. So Harry's Saturn in Scorpio is square her Sun. Harry, at some level, is holding her back. You can kind of pick up that skulking Saturn in Scorpio about Harry, I think. But it's more than that. Because astrologically, one thing that Meghan does have is she has her Sun. She's got a Venus-Mars sextile. Harry's got a Venus-Mars sextile as well, and there is Harry's Venus-Mars sextile, and the dog doesn't find this amusing at all. But there's Harry's Venus-Mars sextile, and her Sun is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and so her having Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint. Venus-Mars is about attractiveness. It's about sexuality. It's about, I suppose, her regarding herself as an attractive, charismatic woman. Sun on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and her Saturn. So Harry's Saturn is hitting that Sun, and I think that there's a real problem there. I don't think she finds him attractive anymore. That's my theory about that. I mean, I think she married him because of who he was. I think that was a big part of it. But that Saturn on her Sun, that Saturn square her Sun is really important, and it's because the Sun is on the Venus-Mars midpoint, and so her Saturn, Harry's Saturn on Meghan's Sun, square her Sun, and Harry's Saturn on her Venus-Mars midpoint. So there's something about him, sort of on a physical level, which I don't know. I think there's something about him. She just doesn't get on with him. She doesn't find him attractive anymore. One can go into further details, but use your imagination. I think that is a big problem there. And going back to the solar returns. Okay, the solar. So when we think about that, and then we think about her. When we think about her 2023 solar return, the fact that she's got Saturn on her 7th house, so 2023, that might have been a time when she really felt that there was a problem, that, okay, he had his uses, but was it really the right thing to be doing, to be marrying him? Second thoughts there, maybe. And that moves us to the solar return for this year. Sorry, that's a marriage solar return. Sorry, let's go to Meghan's 2024 solar return. So here's her solar return for 2024. We have Uranus on a descendant. And, okay, Uranus on a descendant, it's not exactly on a descendant. And by the way, I always calculate my solar returns at the place of birth. That's the way I do it. I don't use the place you're at. But Montecito is probably fairly close to Canoga Park, wherever Canoga Park is. Uranus is quite close to the seventh house cusp, so that might indicate issues in terms of relationships. She also has Venus on the midheaven. This is a solar return where she really, since August, she's really wanting to step out. She's really wanting to be Venus. She's really Venus in Leo, high opinion of herself, really wanting to be seen as a woman. And her Venus is square Uranus, so Venus square Uranus with Venus on the midheaven, Uranus angular. That suggests a little bit of turmoil in terms of her various relationships. I mean, it could be quite exciting, but you also almost think that maybe she's looking for someone else. If she could just find someone a bit better than Harry now, maybe that's perhaps what she's thinking, because Harry doesn't necessarily do it for her. So that is a way it could be working. And I think that we get further support for that if we look at Meghan's horoscope and some of the events that have been recently happening. So Saturn's in Pisces, and Saturn's been transiting her Venus. Now Saturn has finished transiting her Venus just about. So she has got her Venus at 13 degrees 8 Virgo. So her Venus at 13 degrees 8 Virgo. Saturn was at 13 degrees 8 Virgo around 7th and 8th of December. So a week ago, Saturn in theory had finished with Venus. But maybe Saturn on a Venus had done its damage. So if you've got Saturn on your Venus, that's not great for relationships, is it? It's perhaps a reminder that things are not working out. She's feeling she is not supported. She's not getting what she's wanted. And also Venus in Venus in Virgo, I think, is a very important it gives us a lot of information about Meghan. That Venus is largely unaspected. So it's an unaspected planet, I would have said. I mean, it's not, okay, except for Mars. So she's got Venus sextile Mars. So she's got that Venus sextile Mars. That Venus sextile Mars is almost working as an independent pair in her chart. They have their own way of working. So there's a sort of a separation there. But I think Meghan does in a way represent the worst aspects of Venus Virgo. I'm sure lots of you watching this, 1 in 12 people watching this, have got Venus in Virgo, and there's nothing wrong with Venus in Virgo. But in her case, Venus in Virgo is a problem because Venus in Virgo can be very transactional. It can be looking at what is the benefit, even in terms of a marriage, a relationship. How is this person going to benefit from it? It's not, Venus in Virgo is not going to be overwhelmed by the fantasy of the relationship. Let's just get into this relationship. Let's just dissolve her identity. And and be one with Harry. That's not Venus in Virgo. Venus in Virgo is transactional. And in extreme cases, it can be certainly bereft. I have to be careful here, but it's just that it can be a little bereft of personality here in certain cases. I mean, it's interesting that Meghan and Kamala Harris both had Venus in Virgo. And I think for both Meghan and Kamala Harris, perhaps show Venus in Virgo at its worst. I think that it's what people can do for them. Of course, in Kamala Harris's case, her political career started with her having a relationship with, I can't remember his name, but with some leading sort of political figure in San Francisco, and having a relationship. And because of this relationship, she was able to get her first sort of political appointment. So in a way, her political career started with a relationship with someone who was decades older than her. So that's Venus in Virgo. There is something transactional about it. And Meghan, likewise, there is something very transactional about that Venus in Virgo. But Venus in Virgo, in a way, is never satisfied. And with transiting Saturn conjunct her Venus in Virgo, that's a problem. And I think perhaps the transactionality of her approach with Harry has everything's come to light now, and she's having to really realize the implications of it. And aside from Saturn, we have Pluto, Pluto is just moving into Aquarius, and of course Pluto is on her south node, and so the south node represents everything she should not have been doing. Now, using Placidus house cusps, okay, whole sign it would be in the 8th house, but Placidus house cusp, she's got south node in the 7th. What Meghan should have been doing with north node in Leo in the 1st house, Placidus 1st house, she should have been setting herself up as someone who is independent, running her own business because of her, because of who she is. Comparing Meghan and Kamala Harris, I was trying to think about it. I think that Kamala Harris is probably a nicer person than Meghan, but I think Meghan is probably more intelligent than Kamala Harris. I mean, Meghan's not a fool. And it was about North Node in Leo, doing things for herself, not worrying about relationships, not thinking that a relationship can help her get ahead. No, it's all about her doing something special herself. And by marrying Harry, she was actually doing the wrong thing. She should not have been trying to boost herself by marrying someone else, even if that person was close in line to the British monarchy. I think it was said that she was after a rich and famous husband. That's what she was looking for before married, before she came across Harry, and Harry was just the best she found in Britain. But that was so wrong. She was so doing the wrong thing. She was kind of going against her own destiny. And that's her south node in Aquarius in the 7th. And Pluto is now about to cross her south node. And so Pluto crossing the south node, the consequences of her actions are about to unfold, I think. And of course, as Pluto gathers strength as Pluto moves through Aquarius, it will go opposition her Mercury, opposition her Sun, and we'll have to see what happens with that. So I think we really do have to consider Pluto. I think it does matter. Now, as far as her solar arc directions are concerned, I did look at Meghan's solar arc directions. The thing that really came to mind was the fact that her solar arc directed north node is conjunct her Venus. So that's happening at the same time as transiting Saturn is opposition her Venus. So that Venus and what it represents seems to be really emphasized. But I suppose with North Node conjunct her Venus, she's wanting more from relationships. Don't forget, Venus is also about money. And, this may be about her thinking that she can find someone better. I think that is certainly possible. And certainly a lot of people have been speculating this. So those are a few notes, thoughts about Meghan's chart. So let's now look at Harry. And Harry, here's Harry's chart. And Harry, of course, has his own issues. In terms of Harry's transits, he has got Saturn problems, and so Saturn is now at, where's Saturn gone? Saturn is at 13 Pisces. So what's happening now with Harry is that Saturn is starting to move towards the square of Harry's Mars, and it's also moving towards the opposition of Harry's Sun. So he's going to have all of that at the beginning of next year, and so he's got a wide Saturn Sun Mars square in his chart, and so Saturn is going to be really triggering that, and that really could be a problem. And I think that's going to be a sense of, I would have said, real frustration. I mean, I think he's got, I think late January he's got Saturn square his Mars, and then over the following month, then he's going to have Saturn on his Sun-Mars midpoint, and then he's going to have Saturn opposition his Sun. And so the beginning of the year is going to be really hard with those Saturn transits. And then there is his solar arc directions. And Harry's solar arc directions are, I think, quite telling. So Harry's chart in the middle, solar arc directions on the outer wheel. So as far as his solar arc directions are concerned, well, recently, Black Moon, there's solar arc directed Black Moon Lilith. So just over a year ago, he had solar arc directed Black Moon Lilith on his moon. Now, that might have been a revelation about who he'd married. maybe in a way, Meghan was had a sense of being Black Moon Lilith. There's something kind of quite manipulative about her, and the moon is about the feminine. So solar arc directed Black Moon Lilith on his moon may have just given him insights about the personality of the woman who he had married. And in terms of the future, his solar arc directed, look at his solar arc directed midheaven, 26 degrees Sagittarius. It's starting to approach his Neptune. So in 2 years' time, he's going to have solar arc directed midheaven on his Neptune. And for Harry, I think that's going to be difficult. What is his role? Where is he going? He's probably already starting to feel the fact that he's got solar arc directed midheaven on his Neptune. And so that is a problem. And also recently, over the last couple of years, look at his solar arc directed Sun, 2 degrees Scorpio. So 2 years ago so over the last couple of years, he's had solar arc directed Sun on his Pluto, and he's had solar arc directed Black Moon Lilith on his moon. So that perhaps is very sort of self-destructive, and there'll be a lot of recriminations and sort of darkly emotional. And as far as the present is concerned, his solar arc directed Saturn is at, where's it gone? His solar arc directed Saturn is at 22 degrees Sagittarius. So remember, with solar arc directions, He is approximately 40 years old, so I'm moving all of his planets 40 degrees. So his solar arc directed Saturn is at 22 degrees 32 Sagittarius. And so his Sun is at 22 degrees 57 Virgo. So his solar arc directed Saturn is moving to a square of the Sun. So as you can see, a lot of really difficult stuff is going on for Harry. And look, if you think about his Sun, he's got solar arc directed Saturn is square his Sun at the same time as transiting Saturn is opposition his Sun. So his Sun in Virgo, everything who he is, male planet, Harry is male, it's very important to him, the Sun. It's under huge amount of pressure. So for those suggesting that Harry and Meghan's marriage is under pressure, well, it obviously is, and I think that the astrology seems to be confirming what we already know. At least, let me rephrase that. It's confirming what people are already talking about. Obviously, not friends of Harry and Meghan, not their supporters, but it does really show that things are going wrong. But I did want to end on a positive note, and we've spent a lot of time looking at Western astrology, and the positive note is Harry's Vedic chart. And so here is Harry's Vedic chart. Now, in Harry's, let me just hold on. Let me just show you one thing. Sorry, let me go back. I want to say one thing about Harry's natal chart, Western chart, before I go into the Vedic chart. Actually, so if you look at Prince Harry's chart, he has Jupiter in 12th house in Capricorn. And I think there are all sorts of problems with Jupiter in Capricorn. I think that Jupiter in Capricorn can be sort of quite mean and money orientated. Not for everyone. It can be. And he's got it quite close to the ascendant. And this may explain why he has this rather unseemly focus on money, and why he revealed so much in Spare. Let's make this book as popular as possible, get as many readers as possible. Let's get as much attention to it. Doesn't matter what the consequences are. And that might be Jupiter in Capricorn. So you can see that from a Western perspective, his Jupiter in Capricorn, close to the ascendant, using whole sign houses, it's Jupiter in Capricorn rising. You can see that from a Western perspective, it's not great. However, if we look at his chart from a Vedic perspective, we see that Jupiter in a different light, because from a Vedic perspective, that Jupiter in Capricorn goes back into Sagittarius. So he has got Jupiter in Sagittarius rising in his Vedic chart. And I would have said it's a strong Jupiter. In terms of Shad Bala, the sixfold strength system, Jupiter is, I think, the second strongest planet in his chart. So it is a strong Jupiter. Jupiter rules the first house. It also rules the fourth house. The fourth house, I suppose, is his home, his family, what's important to him. Now, in terms of the Vimshottari Dasha system, which separates life out into discrete phases, and you add these phases up all together, and it comes to 120 years. So in March 2007, he entered his Rahu Dasha. And so there's his Rahu in the sixth house. Perhaps a difficult period. This was a period where I suppose did he serve in Afghanistan? I don't know when he stopped serving in Afghanistan, but things changed for him very quickly over this period. Not quickly, over the 18 years of his Rahu Dasha, things have changed greatly for him. And of course, he got married during his Rahu Dasha, and all the issues, and he sort of left his home country and so forth. But his Rahu Dasha is coming to an end. In fact, his Jupiter Dasha starts on 30th of March 2025. So it's only 3 months, just 3.5 months. So it's his Jupiter Dasha, and his Jupiter is really strong. It's in the ninth, it's in Sagittarius, it's in the first house. So, you know, if I was advising Harry, I'd say, hold on, Harry, things are looking good for you. Things might be bad, things are grim, but there is an opportunity here. You can completely turn over a new leaf. The 16 years of the Jupiter Dasha actually could be very favourable. And so this, more than anything else, may indicate that Harry's marriage is over, or it's about to end. Not because the marriage, not just because the marriage is splitting up, or marriage is going nowhere because they're incompatible. It's because Harry's moving on. We always think about Meghan moving on. She's got her own project. We don't think about Harry moving on. Now, Harry might not have any concept of moving on, but his chart is saying he's moving on. He's about to move on. He's about to move into a new stage of his life. And it does start in March. And so perhaps this is it. And of course, maybe Donald Trump will do him a favour and arrange for him to be deported. I mean, that would really do Harry a favour. Maybe Harry actually, at some unconscious level, wants to be deported from America. But, you know, people talk about deportation, by the way, about how if it's found he's lied on this form, he might get deported. But I think, in a way, the American immigration system is that once you're in the country, it's quite difficult to get you out. So I'm not convinced that Trump is actually going to be able to deport Harry, assuming this form shows he's lied lied about drugs and drug use. But anyway, it's looking good for Harry from March onwards. And I would have said, if I was going to advise Harry, I would have said this is the time to make a clean break, move back to England. And if he moved back to England, I think it would be a complete transformation. I think in terms of his happiness, and you might think that Harry's reputation is done, that his life is a disaster. It absolutely needn't be a disaster. And from March onwards, things look really good for him. Now, it's okay, you could say that maybe him and Meghan will patch up and all of this kind of stuff, or I don't think so. I mean, they can stay in a relationship, but why would they want to stay in a relationship in which they're not happy? And yet, his Vedic chart is showing there can be happiness, there can be success, and Jupiter rules the fourth house of home, and his real home is probably in the UK. And so Harry perhaps has the power here to change things. So I think things are looking up for Harry, and I think the right thing for him to do is to move on and realise that Meghan was just a phase in his life. I mean, obviously he's got to work out the children and so forth, but I think that's what he should do. So I think there is definitely a big silver lining for Harry, at least from a Vedic perspective. Anyway, sorry to talk about Meghan and Harry again. I'll try not to talk about them for months to come. I'll try to stay away from the subject in future. So sorry for that blast of Meghan and Harry. You're probably as bored of the subject as I am. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.